Los Angeles in the mid-1990s was a city on edge, and to understand the O.J. Simpson trial, you have to understand the storm it was born into. Just a few years earlier, the world had watched in horror as footage of lapped officers beating Rodney King sparked outrage and, later, one of the most destructive urban uprisings in American history. Tensions between the police and minority communities were at a breaking point, and trust in law enforcement, especially within the black community, was at an all-time low. Against this backdrop stood Orenthal James O.J. Simpson, a football legend, beloved celebrity, and cultural icon who had, for years, been seen as someone who transcended racial boundaries. But in 1994, his name would become forever tied to one of the most infamous murder cases in U.S. history.
Emergency. Can you get someone over here now to 325 Gretna Green? He's back. Please.
Well, okay, what does he look like?
He's O.J. Simpson. I think you know his record. Could you just send somebody over here?
Okay, what is he doing there?
He just drove up again.
He just drove up
over?
Okay, wait a minute. What kind of car is he in?
He's in a white Bronco, but first of all, he broke the back door down to get in.
Okay, wait.
In this episode of Lawyers Justice, we take you deep inside the trial that many believed was impossible to win, a case that pitted a mountain of forensic evidence against a defense team determined to dismantle it piece by piece. Disclaimer: the information in this program is compiled from publicly available sources, including news archives, court transcripts, and historical records. It is intended for educational and documentary purposes only, and no confidential or privileged material is included. On the evening of June 12, 1994, Nicole Brown Simpson and her friend Ronald Goldman were brutally murdered outside Nicole's condominium in the Brentwood area of Los Angeles. The crime scene, discovered just after midnight, was one of shocking violence, blood on the walkway, overturned items, and clear signs of a struggle. Police quickly began piecing together a timeline, and before long, suspicion centered on O.J. Simpson, Nicole's ex-husband. The case seemed straightforward to many: a history of domestic violence, a contentious divorce, and now, a brutal double homicide. But as the investigation moved forward, it became clear that this was no ordinary criminal case. It was about to become a legal and media spectacle unlike anything America had ever seen. From the very start, the LAP believed they had an overwhelming case against O.J. Simpson. At the crime scene, investigators collected bloody footprints, later identified as belonging to a rare size 12 Bruno Magli shoe, a brand and style almost never seen in the U.S. Drops of blood were found leading away from the scene, matching O.J. Simpson's DNA, an almost unheard-of connection in criminal cases at the time, as DNA evidence was still relatively new in courtrooms. In Simpson's white Ford Bronco, police discovered blood belonging to both victims, as well as blood stains at his Rockingham estate. Perhaps most damning was a single leather glove found at Nicole's condo, and its matching partner found at Simpson's home. The prosecution would later argue that no one but the killer could have left such a perfect trail tying the defendant to the crime. For most legal analysts at the time, this was considered a textbook open and shut murder case. But the defense team, soon nicknamed the Dream Team, saw something else: opportunities to turn the seemingly ironclad evidence into points of doubt and mistrust. From the moment O.J. Simpson was named as a suspect, the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office knew this would be one of the most high-profile cases in American history. Lead prosecutor Marcia Clark and co-counsel Christopher Darden believed they had an unshakable story to present: a jealous ex-husband with a documented history of domestic abuse, a bitter divorce, and a pattern of control and violence toward Nicole Brown Simpson. They introduced evidence of 911 calls Nicole had made, detailing threats and assaults, to establish a motive rooted in rage and obsession.
911 emergency.
Can you get someone over here now to 325 Gretna Green? He's back. Please.
Well, okay, what does he look like?
He's O.J. Simpson. I think you know his record. Could you just send somebody over here?
Okay, what is he doing there?
He just drove up again.
He drove
somebody
up?
over?
Okay, wait a minute. What kind of car is he in?
He's in a white Bronco, but first of all, he broke the back door down to get in.
Okay, wait a minute. What's your name?
Nicole Simpson.
Okay, is he the sports counselor or whatever?
Yeah.
Okay, and
Thank you.
wait a minute. We're sending the police. What is he doing? Is he threatening you?
Clark's approach was straightforward: walk the jury step by step through a chain of evidence that connected Simpson to the crime beyond any reasonable doubt. The prosecution argued that on the night of June 12, 1994, Simpson left his home, drove to Nicole's condo, and committed the murders in a fit of rage before rushing back to prepare for an early morning flight to Chicago. They had a clear timeline, narrowed down to a window of about 1 hour, during which they claimed the murders took place. To reinforce their case, they relied heavily on forensic science, believing the DNA evidence would be that slam dunk that ended the trial quickly. But what prosecutors underestimated was how the defense would weaponize the very tools the state thought would guarantee conviction. The defense team, famously dubbed the Dream Team, knew they couldn't simply deny the existence of physical evidence. Instead, they set out to undermine the credibility of that evidence at every possible turn, using tried-and-true legal strategies that have saved defendants in even the most hopeless cases. Barry Scheck, a pioneer in DNA defense, meticulously combed through the LAPD's handling of every blood sample. He highlighted sloppy procedures, vials stored improperly, evidence left unattended, and samples potentially contaminated. By raising doubts about how evidence was collected and stored, the defense made jurors question whether the DNA results could be trusted at all. Johnny Cochran masterfully reframed Simpson not as a violent abuser, but as a black man being framed by a historically racist police force. He tapped into the collective mistrust of the lab, especially in the aftermath of the Rodney King beating, making the trial as much about institutional racism as about murder. The most devastating example was the takedown of Detective Mark Furman. Under questioning, Furman denied ever using racial slurs, only for the defense to later produce tapes proving otherwise. This not only destroyed Furman's credibility but allowed the defense to suggest that the glove found at Simpson's home could have been planted. Perhaps the most famous moment came when Darden asked Simpson to try on the leather glove, and it appeared too small. Cochran seized on the moment with the now iconic line, "If it doesn't fit, you must acquit." This was less about proving a fact and more about creating a visual that would stick in the jury's mind. Rather than present an alternative theory of the crime, the defense flooded the trial with enough questions about the evidence, police integrity, and lab reliability to make conviction feel unsafe. By the time they were done, the mountain of evidence the prosecution began with looked more like a pile of questionable assumptions. Even in long, complex trials, there are certain moments when you can feel the momentum shift, and in the O.J. Simpson case, these turning points began stacking up in the defense's favor. When tapes surfaced of Detective Mark Furman using racial slurs and discussing police misconduct, the defense scored its biggest credibility hit against the lab. This was more than just bad optics. It allowed Cochran to suggest that a lead detective in the case was both biased and capable of planting evidence. What was supposed to be a prosecution highlight, having Simpson try on the blood-stained glove, backfired spectacularly. Simpson struggled to pull it on, flexing his fingers in exaggerated effort, and Cochran instantly turned it into the defense's rallying cry, "If it doesn't fit, you must acquit." This moment wasn't just theatrical, it visually undermined one of the prosecution's central pieces of evidence. Barry Scheck's relentless questioning of lab technicians planted seeds of doubt about contamination, mishandling, and improper sealing of samples. For jurors unfamiliar with the science, the takeaway was simple: if there was even a chance the evidence was tainted, they couldn't trust it. As the trial wore on, the defense successfully reframed the case in the media and the courtroom. Instead of asking, "Did O.J. do it?" jurors were now asking, "Can we trust the police and the evidence?" In his closing statement, Cochran blended law, emotion, and rhythm, hammering home that the state hadn't met its burden of proof. By the time he finished, the phrase reasonable doubt was not just legal terminology, it was the defense's anthem. These turning points didn't just chip away at the prosecution's case, they completely flipped the trial's emotional energy, making an acquittal, once unthinkable, suddenly possible. On October 3, 1995, after nearly 9 months of testimony and just 4 hours of jury deliberation, the verdict was ready. Millions of Americans stopped what they were doing to watch live as the clerk read the words, "Not guilty." Simpson exhaled, tears welling in his eyes, while his defense team embraced in quiet triumph. But the celebration in the courtroom was not mirrored outside. Across the country, reactions were split sharply along racial lines. Many Black Americans saw the verdict as a rare victory against a justice system stacked against them, while many white Americans viewed it as a blatant miscarriage of justice. News outlets broadcast side-by-side footage of workplaces, schools, and community centers. In some, cheers erupted; in others, stunned silence or outright anger. For the prosecution, it was a crushing defeat. Marsha Clark would later say she knew the case was lost when the trial shifted from the murders themselves to the conduct of the lapped. And yet, for defense attorneys like Johnny Cochran, it was proof that a skilled legal team could dismantle even the most formidable-seeming case. Within days, debate raged on talk shows, in newspaper editorials, and in living rooms across America. Had justice been served, or had the system failed? The verdict wasn't the end of Simpson's legal troubles, but it became one of the most iconic examples of an against-the-odds courtroom victory in modern history. And that's the story of how the defense in the O.J. Simpson trial turned what looked like an impossible case into one of the most stunning courtroom victories in history. It wasn't just about evidence, or even about the man on trial, it was about the power of strategy, the influence of narrative, and the ability of a skilled legal team to reshape the way a jury sees the truth. Here on Lawyers Justice, we explore moments like this, when the law becomes a battlefield of intellect and persuasion, and where a single decision can change history. This case reminds us that in the courtroom, it's not always the facts alone that win the day, but how those facts are fought for, framed, and felt. And sometimes, against all odds, the side everyone counted out walks away victorious.